If you have a Bible there and you'd like to turn to the passage, Acts chapter number 1, we'll read maybe just 3 verses and stay within our time tonight. And Lord willing, we'll get something to maybe help us or prepare us for the preaching that is to come. I do appreciate Pastor Wilkinson's emphasis and care about missions. There's a lot of definition of missions, but really for me, it's just about reaching people in other places. And what you do in the mission field is really what you do anywhere. It's just the same thing in a different place. It's always moving to me, the flags, that was particularly moving to me. And I was just thinking tonight, I'm so glad I went. I'm so glad I went. You say, you have any regrets? I don't have any regrets. I don't have any regrets. If God is calling you to go to a foreign field, consider it an honor that He's calling you. All right, don't fight that. Just consider it a great honor that He would even ask you, and be glad to yield yourself. And you might think, I don't feel I have a lot to offer. You know, the way it works with the Lord is this: whom He recruits, He resources. And so God will get somebody first, and then He'll equip them for the task. And that's how that goes. God doesn't equip people who don't go. God doesn't equip people for them to put that in a storage somewhere. God doesn't do that. Whom He recruits, He resources. So if God is calling you, you can be sure that He'll supply everything you need to be able to do that. Acts chapter 1, let's read verse number 9. And when He had spoken these things, while they beheld, He was taken up, and a cloud received Him out of their sight. And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as He went up, behold, 2 men stood by them in white apparel, which also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus, which is taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like manner as you have seen Him go into heaven. All right, I have a few simple thoughts for you tonight in the next about 7 minutes on this subject: what to do when everything changes. What to do when everything changes. I want you just to go a little bit on a mental journey with these disciples. And it started for them when somebody got to them and said, you know what, we found the Messiah. Now, when that occurred, there were a lot of people in that day kind of looking for the Messiah, and talk of the coming Messiah was nothing new. People were talking and speculating, but it started with these when they realized, or somebody told them, they found out for themselves, we found the Messiah. Jesus, He's the real one. It's really Him. He's here. He's God in the flesh. There's nowhere else to go. We found Him. And they begin to follow Him. And as they followed Him, He then sent them out, and amazing things started happening. They came back rejoicing, and they said, Lord, you won't believe what happened. Even the demons are subject to us in your name. And Jesus rejoiced with them about that. And they were kind of on this journey, and I know we have Bibles and we've read it, and we already know how it ends before we start it. But if you'd actually been there, this was unfolding progressively. And there were things happening that they did not always understand what was happening. They didn't have the end of the book to look at. And so they found the Messiah, they began to follow Him, and then they got to, He's dead. Oh. And they scattered. And then after He's dead, they got to, He's alive. And it just, all this was unfolding before them. And then they finally got to this place where they walked with Him out onto a mountain, and then He was taken up. And the Bible vividly paints a picture of them standing there, and everybody's looking up, that He's gone. And then the men in white apparel come along and say some things to them. In the service of the Lord, in the local church, and wherever you are, sometimes things around you, they change. And change most affects you when you're not expecting it. You didn't think something was going to happen. You didn't think the ministry would go this way. You didn't think it would quite work this way on the field. You had been thinking this, and that's kind of a bit what was happening here. And when that goes on, sometimes we don't always make the wisest decisions. Here's what we ought to do. Number one, realize you are in the right place. You are in the right place. Don't question where you are because things didn't quite work out how you thought. Don't question to the place because it goes a little bit differently to how you thought it might have gone. He led them to the mountain. He led them to Jerusalem. They were in the right place. And though we might be tempted when things seem to be a little bit different to question, am I truly where I'm meant to be? The answer is you are. You are. You were placed there for God's eternal purposes. I want you to understand that you can liken God, or Brother Sehmish tonight will liken God to a master chess player. And what you are a piece on that board. And what God does, he takes you and he positions you in a certain place. Now, you don't understand the strategy of the overall game because you're just one piece in one place. But God puts you there very deliberately and very precisely. And you sometimes can wonder, what am I doing here? Here's what you need to do. Stay in your place. Because you're actually part of a greater plan that you may not understand. Many a chess game has resulted in victory because one pawn stayed in its place. One pawn just stayed there. So get your place. When God puts you there, occupy your square. Occupy your square. This is where I am. This is where I'm meant to be. I'm not sure what's going on over there. And that looks like one of our own may have just toppled over. But I'll just leave that to the master tactician because he's got it all under control. Just occupy your space. Number two, stop staring up because he's gone, but you're here. And there comes a place where you need to realize, okay, Jesus has gone to heaven now, and he can do that because his work is finished. But yours is not. Yours is not. You're not going anywhere right yet. Jesus could say, it is finished. There's nobody here tonight who can say that about your work. And so you need to understand, okay, disciples, he's gone, but you're here. You're here. So stop staring up, and now you finish your work. Now you do what God has asked you to do. All of us need to continue doing what the Lord has asked us to do. Number three, stop looking up and start looking out. Stop looking up and start looking out. Jesus had already told them in verse number 8 that ye shall be witnesses unto me, both in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and unto the uttermost part of the earth. You know, sometimes what we do, we stare at things that we don't really understand. And it can preoccupy us a little bit. And when we see things going on around us that we don't understand, we can fix our gaze on that. And we can stare at that. And I'm going to tell you that in the service of the Lord and in life, particularly in our times, we live in a period of turbulent change. As the world is preparing for the one who will come in his name. And so there's a lot of change going on. But here's what we need to do. Stop looking up and start looking out. And let's start to do. When you don't understand what's going on, get on with what you do understand. Start doing what you know you need to do. Start reaching people. Set your eyes on the fields. Jesus said, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest, and he that reapeth receiveth wages. He receiveth wages. There's reward for people who will look out and go out. There's reward for that. Number 4, when things are changing on around you, remember what he taught you already. Remember what you were taught before. You know, you may not have realized it, but you've already been pre-prepared for your challenges. That thing that just seemed to come out of nowhere and maybe you were surprised or maybe you weren't expecting that. Actually, you'd already been pre-prepared. These men were never more ready than they were right now. They didn't understand it. They didn't fully understand all that was going on. But the Lord had prepared them for such a time as this. You're that way too. God has already prepared you for that which is coming. Go ye therefore and teach all nations. You say, how were they to do that? Because they themselves had already been taught. Teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. Lastly, number 5, know that when you see this kind of change happening, it is part of God's plan for you and for others. What's going on? Where did he go? Stop looking up. Look out. This is part of the plan. This was meant to happen. This is the timing now. But this same Jesus, he will be back. He'll be back. But what you need to do right now, the plan of God is that you do what the Lord has asked you to do. This is all part of the plan. Sometimes we look at things and think, well, this can't be part of the plan. You're going to get to the day when you get to heaven, you'll fall down before the Lord and you'll speak out what you've read before, but you'll believe it then and you'll say this, He doeth all things well. He doeth, in my life, He doeth all things well. In our church, He doeth all things well. And you can trust Him for that. 5 simple things to do when things are changing around you, Pastor.